good morning, everybody. Good morning. Funny how the world works. I have a koan that I'm going to talk about this morning, and kind of clearly had in mind what I wanted to say about it. And then this morning I came across an article by Norman Fisher. And I thought, well, this is kind of an interesting article, and maybe I should talk about this. And I said, no, I'm going to stick with the koan. I'm going to stick with the koan. I have my plan. And then at some point it dawned on me they were both talking about the same thing. And so I will be talking both about the koan and Norman Fisher's article. And the koan I'm starting with is one that involves Nanchuan. And of course, when I mention Nanchuan, everybody thinks of Nanchuan kills the cat, one of the most famous koans, period, right? Because it's outrageous. I think it sort of gets people's attention. And as I've said before, and as you know, I don't think Nanchuan killed the cat. And I think Nanchuan loved animals. And this koan is one of the examples of that. So in this koan, Nanchuan, let me back up. Nanchuan, just to put him in perspective, he is a student of the great master Ma Tzu, one of the most important teachers of Tang Dynasty China. He produced some very important heirs, Nanchuan being one, also Paichang, who you know as Hakujo and the fox. Well, that's Paichang in Chinese. Okay, so Ma's is a very important lineage with several important teachers. And Nanchuan was one of his students. And then, of course, Nanchuan's heir was Cao Cao, who is much beloved at Treetop because Steph was very taken with Cao Cao, and as are some of the others of us, which brings me to a commercial announcement. This coming Saturday at Treetop, we will have Steph's memorial service. The 24th is the memorial of his death, and with Zen teachers we hold a memorial service each year on the anniversary, or as close to the anniversary as we can practically get. So that will be coming this Saturday at Treetop. Okay. So Nanchuan said to the assembly, "The Buddhas of past, present, and future do not know it is. Cats and cows know it is." Nanchuan said to the assembly, "The Buddhas of past, present, and future do not know it is. Cats and cows know it is." So what is it that cats and cows know? And why, interesting? Why did Nanchuan pick cats and cows? Why didn't he pick elephants and buffaloes or mice and giraffes? And I'm going to let you all answer that question.
They do zazen.
He do zazen.
Mm.
Well, certainly that's probably part of it. The demeanor, has to be an older cat, the old monastery cat lying in the sun, right, on the steps, or the cows out grazing in the field. Certainly, that's very zazen-like. Any other connections?
They're domesticated.
Not necessarily.
I just offer a thought that bubbled up. My first response is neither the Buddhas nor the cats and cows are confused. Cats and cows, it seems to me, are not confused about uh, their existence in the manifest world.
Yeah, yes. Why are they not confused?
Because they don't have the delusive thoughts that entertain us human beings all the time, as best we know.
Yeah, I mean, but even if they have they have thoughts, they're probably not delusions because they are right there in the moment doing the thing that they do. That cat that's napping, we presume it's not thinking about going back to work tomorrow or, all of those things. Those cows are not, contemplating great existential questions about life and death. They're just right there doing what they do. Very, and generally speaking, very calm animals, very calm, just doing what they do. So that's that Zazen connection. Yeah. Okay. So that's what I think too, that Nanchuan's pointing to here is that they don't make anything complicated. Right? Cats and cows don't complicate their lives. Humans complicate their lives. Humans make themselves crazy thinking about things and worrying about things in the past and in the future and in the moment. But these animals don't do that. So to some extent, I think that Nanchuan is pointing to that, pointing to the fact that we need to live, but just live, not add more, not add complications and confusions and analyses. And I think that part of the reason he's pointing this way, is that we tend to try to apply analysis to the Dharma, apply analysis to our practice of Zen. We try to think our way through to enlightenment. We read books. I'm going to read, if I read the right book at the right time and I read enough of these books, I'm going to get it. Right. And that's not, I think we all have that delusion to a greater or lesser extent because of who we are. We are not cats and cows. We are humans. And we are very, 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 very attached to our thinking and our analyzing, our conceptualizing. And so it's very difficult for us, in fact, to achieve the simple practice of the cats and cows. For them, it's simple. It's their nature. It's just what they do. But our nature is overlayered with thinking and analyzing and projecting and so on. And again, when we carry it, we bring that in, we have discussions and we read and, analyze and so on. And so, I think Nanchuan is calling us back here, calling us back to the simplest way of being, to simply be immersed in our lives, be immersed in each moment. And we don't have to chew grass or chase mice to do that. But whatever it is in our lives, not overthink, not analyze, You know, I think it's safe to say that there is a negative correlation between reading books on Zen and realizing oneself. Okay. The more books that we read, the further that we go from it. And that's not to say that we shouldn't read books on Zen, but we have to read them with a certain spirit. And I've said this before. It can be a spirit of inquiry. We can be interested in the history. Who was this Dogen guy? What did he do? What did he say? Very interesting inquiry. You know, there's great cultural enrichment that can be obtained from reading about Zen. There's poetic beauty that can be obtained from reading, you know, some of the, but not realization. We can't think our way to realization. We can't analyze life and come up with Buddha nature. That can only be revealed in the absence of those things. Nor can we accelerate it. Practice must be for its own sake, and realization will come when it comes. There is a relationship between those things, but it's not a relationship that we can see, grasp, or hold on to, or utilize. It just like a thunderstorm. Yesterday we had tremendous thunderstorms, some of us, and you know, it just came. Here it is. And then it was gone. So with that as context, I want to bring up Norman Fisher's article here and read a little section of it. What did I do with it? I just destroyed it. No, come on. It's not coming up. I can't, it's not staying on the screen for some reason. Maybe I'll try another trick here. No. All right, forget Norman. Wasn't such a good talk anyway. Good article. No, I really would like, really wish I could read it to you. And I don't know why it's not, the computer is not cooperating, but I can tell you the gist of it. Okay, so Norman's article is on despair. It's in Tricycle. You can probably find it if you're curious. And what he's talking about overall is the elimination of fear through Buddhist practice. And his basic thesis, which is a fundamentally correct one, is that, I'm going to paraphrase liberally, fear cannot exist in the present moment. Fear relies on the past and the future, and that's where it dwells. And so we tend to project ourselves into other time frames. You know, and the simplest example, I used to talk about this in terms of the dentist, right? It's like, okay, before you go to the dentist, we anticipate what it's going to be like at the dentist. And usually those associations are unpleasant. You know, you don't sit there saying, oh, I'm looking forward to this guy sticking his hand in my mouth with a noisy drill. And, you know, right. We have these and all that pain. That's the beauty of going to the dentist. No. So we're anticipating the negative, right? And in terms of the Dharma, the Buddhist, you know, that's what we talk about when we talk about suffering. Suffering isn't the pain in the dentist chair. It's our projection, our thoughts, our fears about what it's going to be like when we go to the dentist. And in fact, it almost never is as bad as we've imagined it to be. So our suffering is the thing that we create. And so Norman is talking about this in the context of fear. And he spent some time talking about particularly the fear of death, right? So we have a fear of death because we project into the future and we worry about whatever it is, what's going to happen after I die, what's it going to, you know, what I'm not going to exist, what's that all about, and you know, on and on. When in fact, in this moment, that's completely irrelevant. It's completely unnecessary. Okay, and so but by having the thoughts, having the attachments, right? We have the attachments to our lives. Oh my God, I'm going to lose this. I'm going to lose that. We do the same thing with aging, right? Oh my God, you know, I can't do what I used to do. And if we dwell on that, it can be very upsetting. I mean, you know, aging is no fun. All right, and so he actually sort of gets into this. He talks about a friend of his who's an environmentalist kind of a guy and also an outdoorsman. And over the course of their friendship, he notices this guy is getting into more and more despair around climate change, to the point where it's almost paralyzing him. Deep, deep despair. And of course, despair is not at all desirable, but not only being unpleasant, but it is paralyzing. And so what Fisher says to him is, well, you're not despairing because of climate change. You're despairing because of something else, and you need to figure out what that is. So this guy, some period of time passes by and they get together again. And the guy says yet to Norman, yes, you were right. It's not about that. It's about the fact that I'm aging and I'm, you know, not going to be able to continue going into the mountains much longer. And I'm, you know, I'm losing the things that I enjoy doing in the outdoors. I may not even be able to ride my bike much longer. And that's really the source of my despair. And once the guy was able to recognize that and let go of it, he came to a different relationship with climate change. Now, I find that extraordinary on a number of levels. You know, first of all, I sort of have a fundamental disagreement. It's not a disagreement, but I sort of see a little differently than Norman, because I'm not sure that no matter how much we let go, no matter how much we live in the present moment, we're going to get rid of fear. I think like many Buddhist concepts, they get overstated. I have a clear example yesterday. Yesterday, I had to work on a ladder for a couple of hours. Anybody that knows me knows that I have an extreme fear of height. I have a phobia. There's no doubt I have the phobia. When I'm on a ladder, I experience physiologic consequences. I'm shaking, I can feel the adrenaline, my heart's pumping the whole time that I'm up on the ladder. The ladder, you know, I go to great lengths to make sure that ladder is going to be steady. It's not going to sway. You know, I watch somebody like Todd, whom, as you know, paints houses. He can get up on that ladder and he's 20 feet up and the ladder's going like this and he's just painting away. You know, I can't, I can't imagine that. I got to have that ladder absolutely steady. I brace up all the, you know, and I'm up there and I like, you know, it took me probably a half an hour at least of being off the ladder before my body returned to homeostasis. Okay, well, you might say, well, Peter, don't think about falling off the ladder. Well, I've learned that. I don't think about falling off the ladder because if I did that, I wouldn't even be up there. I have to not think about it just to get off the ground. And then it doesn't matter. Okay, I still go through this thing. And I think that's part of the reality. So I think the part of the reality and part of what the Dharma is teaching us, not that we're going to live without fear, but that we can live with fear. Right? We can. The fear doesn't, you know, for many years, the fear ruled me. And it still does sometimes, but other times, no, I can do it. I can be on the ladder and okay, like I feel really lousy, but I can do it. The fear doesn't have to rule me. And so I thought my number one sort of, you know, I hate to say I'm disagreeing with Norma because that's too strong a thing, but I do think this is much more subtle and not so clearly dichotomous as many Buddhist teachers present it. All of these states of mind, you know, and maybe in another 40 years, I will have practiced long enough that I will agree with that. But the first 40 years haven't done it. Okay. But the second thing, and this is where I start to, you know, was the outcome that Fisher talked about with his friend actually the desired outcome, or the desirable outcome? Was this guy being able to live comfortably with climate change? And we could substitute whatever other fear we want and whatever other disaster we want. Was that the desirable out? Was that the desired outcome? Is that where we want to go? And this is a question I think I mentioned to you in the last time or two that a friend of mine and I, she's a mindfulness teacher, and she and I are putting together a little podcast series on exactly this subject, on the subject of Buddhist and mindfulness practice and the realities, the existential realities that we're facing today, particularly the realities around climate change. So, so this is a really interesting question to me. Is the desired outcome that we be comfortable with climate change? Or again, whatever of the serious social, economic, environmental, racial problems that we have today. This is, in fact, one critique of Buddhism. That Buddha's practice can become a substitute for activism, a substitute for social engagement. And it can be, you know, can it in itself be bypassing our engagement with fundamental realities in the world? So I think where his analysis comes up a little short is that he's talking about the elimination of fear, but not the engagement of compassion. And in saying that, I'm saying that not that we should be fearful. And apparently this fellow was so fearful that it was causing the despair, and the despair was causing paralysis, and that's never good. But is there a way that we can work skillfully with our fear and still stay engaged with the world and with the problems in the world? And my answer that I come back to time and again is compassion. You know, Zen is a Mahayana practice. And when we sort of start talking about ourselves and our fears and what I need, we're really moving out of the Mahayana mode into a more Theravadan. I don't want to say that, but into an older way of seeing things. If you read the older sutras, that's kind of what it's talking about, is that personal liberation, that personal freedom, that not have to experience these unpleasant things. But in the Mahayana perspective, we need to stay engaged with the suffering in the world. That's our job, is to help alleviate suffering of other beings. However we do that. And so while we shouldn't wallow in despair, we shouldn't allow fear to overwhelm us. We also need to balance that with the engagement of compassion. And that is a very difficult and subtle balance to maintain. It's one I know that I personally struggle with every day. And it's very easy. It's kind of that sensitive balance that, if I go a little to this far away, this way, I start to fall into despair. I start to feel overwhelmed. I start to feel hopeless. And if I go too far this way, I'm losing sight of the suffering of billions of beings. And so as I see it, our chore as Zen practitioners is, I got a phrase for it. I don't think I'm going to copyright this. The middle way. I think we need to find the middle way. I think we need to find the way to balance and live our lives in compassion and engagement, and yet not being overwhelmed and despairing and paralyzed and fearing. That's our chore in the 21st century. That's our chore as Zen practitioners. That's our chore as human beings. How many friends that we have each that are like Norman Fisher's friend? Whether it's climate change or COVID or some other thing, are overwhelmed by despair, are paralyzed and unable to do anything. And frankly, that's almost everybody that I know, to some greater or lesser extent. And so we have this practice. We have these skillful means to work with this stuff. And it is work. It's work that we need to do continually. We need to remain in that middle way. We need to maintain that balance point where we can interact with the world compassionately and skillfully, and we cannot fall into being overwhelmed and despairing and fearful. So I'm going to pause there and hear what you guys think.
Isn't there a sort of a concept like the Bodhisattva vow, wherein you do not become fully enlightened until you have fully enlightened all other beings? And it seems to me that it's sort of this. I mean, we could just sort of disappear into shikantaza and feel no pain. But our way is not to do that. And we're choosing to be in the world with other people. And it sounds kind of abstract. I will, not become enlightened until I have enlightened everyone else or eliminated all suffering. But maybe part of it is the practical stuff of working on climate change, which causes pain and suffering. That's a response I have.
So we say that vow at the close of every sitting, right? The words are different. We've changed the wording. We used to say sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. And now, so now it's creations are numberless and I vow to free them. But that's the Bodhisattva vow. We say it every time we sit. And it's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting how many of us, how often have we examined what that vow actually means and how we live it in our lives? And I think that's what this is calling to us to do that. And there's varied interpretations. For example, you can interpret it completely in the absolute and say, I realized myself, and therefore the whole universe has realized I've done the job. I'm done. I'm out, at least for this lifetime. And, or we can take a more relative interpretation. And my sense, once again, is like, what's the middle way there? What's the middle way between my realization liberates the world and, oh, here's a few trillion suffering beings that don't seem to give a shit about my realization, which is the relative truth. And so again, I think there's a danger to falling to either side. There are Buddhist practitioners, many wonderful people, very serious people who will say that, I'm working on my realization because that's the way I'm going to save the universe. And that's not wrong. It's just half the truth. It's half the truth. If it was the whole truth, Buddha would have solved it all 2,500 years ago. Because certainly his realization is infinitely greater than mine. Can't even imagine it. And yet, here we are in this morass of the world. So there must be more than one truth here, or more than one dimension of the truth.
The first Dharma talks I ever heard talked about walking the knife edge, which would be another way of looking at the middle way, but making it sound not comfortable, dangerous.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Mount Katahdin. Okay. No. Yes, it's not comfortable, right? It's not comfortable. I think you're right, Mary Jo. Nor is it easy, and talking about it takes constant awareness, constant mindfulness of what we're doing, what we're thinking, how we're acting, right? Constant being an exaggeration, but we do need to be aware. We do need to be awake. We do need to be mindful. We do need to be present. And also, but we can't quite be the cats and the cows. You know, we've got to look at the balance, because we are called upon to act in the world in a different way. When we go back into the marketplace, do we have a responsibility? Is our realization a pass, or is our realization a burden? Not burden, not the right word, but the bag that we carry, the thing that we need to deal with.
Much of my familiarity with fear during my life has been in terms of protecting myself. And when you're protecting yourself, you're closing yourself off from practically everything. And it's a very individual, inside, outside response that doesn't work at all. And not until I'm ready to face the unknown and accept it as unknown, that that protective shield will not begin to dissolve. So it has, for me, it has much to do with forgetting myself and seeing the bigger picture, reframing it in some way. But it is paralyzing. It is definitely paralyzing.
I'm sorry. No, I want to stop the video. I want. Yeah. Sorry. Willie's going nuts because Elizabeth is coming into the house, and I want to reflect on what you said, Deborah. What you said is so beautiful and so important, and so true of all of us. It's so true of all of us, and that's that process of expanding and constricting ourselves. But the interesting thing is that can go. We can go all the way out. So again, we're talking about the middle way. If I constrict into myself and my needs, then I'm cutting off the world. But I can also go so deeply into non-separation that everything that's happening in the relative is irrelevant. Many of you probably have experienced this on the cushions. When you're deep in samadhi, when you're deep in non-separation, there are no issues. Right? And so if we're dwelling there, we're missing here. So again, bringing us back to this middle way, bringing us back to the proportionality. I need to step away for just one moment. Please talk amongst yourselves.
I had a thought about Norman Fisher's comments as Peter stated them, something I took issue with when he was saying, well, your fear of climate change, when you analyze it, it's fear of old age, dying and death. But this morning I heard on public radio a research scientist who had taken a survey around the globe and found that a very high percentage, way more than 50% of young people are really afraid of climate change. And they're not worried about old age. They're worried about climate change. And I like the Zen Peace Master approach to bear witness, to not know, and to take compassionate action. And I think that third part, the compassionate action, is what Peter's talking about. And I wanted to let everyone know I came across a site that helps me take action in a way that works for my level of energy, which is not super high these days. And it's a site called Chop Wood, Carry Water. And every weekday, this young woman puts out a blog, and in it, she tells you what you can do that day. The first thing that she talks about is that you should have your senators and your representatives' numbers in your phone so that it's really easy to just make that call. And so she says at a minimum, call your, and she'll tell you, call your senator and here's a script for you, or call your representative. Usually I'm calling Susan Collins because the others pretty much go my way. But, and then it gets more complicated. You can write postcards, you can get in a phone bank, you can be on social media and send out different messages. So I was just really excited to find something that I can do just about every day, that it doesn't take Herculean effort. So I just wanted to share that with everybody because I think it's pretty exciting.
Could you please send that out on the Wild Fox list?
I will do that, yes.
Thank you. I just caught the tail end of that, Susan, but thank you. And by the way, anyone who's serious about chopping wood and carrying water, come on up to Unity. We can always use more of that. So any further thoughts or observations? Disputations? Dissertations?
I guess I'd like to say that I don't think that living without fear, well, I don't think it's possible, nor do I think it's natural. I'm thinking cats and cows and every animal experiences fear and stress hormones, and I think it's the way of the natural world that we inhabit. I think maybe most of you know that I'm a psychotherapist and I see a ton of people every week, and a lot of the suffering that we're processing is the fear folks have, but also their feelings about the fear and their desire to push away the fear or to live without the fear, which is, I think the fear is the primary suffering, and the desire to have a disillusion of all the fears is the secondary and maybe more robust form of suffering. And I find my time is spent in session working with people on acceptance of the fear as opposed to mitigating or totally alleviating the content of their fear. So I want to throw that in.
Yes, thank you, Robert. I mean, that's also that is an important element. One of the things that we tend to do in this culture is take things like fear, or one that really comes out for me is grief, right? I mean, when any of us has a major loss, the natural thing to do is experience grief. And in that grief, there's going to be some depression. There's going to be sadness, there may be some fear, all of those things that are a natural part of our response to a loss. And yet somehow in our culture, we've you know, if in many other cultures, people grieve, they wail, they scream, they cover themselves with mud, they bang their heads against walls. They have all sorts of way that they express that grief, but we're not allowed to. It's almost, you know, almost like something wrong with you if your loved one dies and you're depressed. It's like, come on, you know, get yourself going, blah, 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 bullshit, right? I mean, and so, you know, I think Robert's pointing something important. And again, I think we kind of lose sight of this sometimes in Zen or in the Dharma, is that, you know, Zen isn't teaching us to escape the grief or the fear or whatever. It's teaching us to live with it. To, in a sense, to embrace it. Because that's what it means to be alive. That's what it means to be human. And yes, if the cat didn't have any fear, the first fox that's coming along is going to have a dinner. Right? There's also a relevance to these things in the right context. You know, we'll wrap up here, but, you know, I think it's just, you know, that's a fundamental myth in our culture that we can somehow have one side and not the other. We can somehow have joy, happiness, you know, love, all these positive things, and we're not going to have fear and grief and pain, and, you know, and as frankly, that's a big driver of addictions from my perspective, is that, you know, people go in search of a drug because a drug can accomplish that for you, at least for a while, of annihilating all the negative, and you're only living, everything's wonderful till the bus crashes. But that kind of, you know, that's part of why I believe addiction is so prevalent in our society today, because we're somehow taught that we should feel good all the time. And nothing's going to make us feel good all the time, and the Dharma is not going to make us feel good all the time.
Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it.